One of the most troubling trends in the United States of America is that an ever-growing number of Americans are starting to believe that rights are not just freedoms from government intervention, but in fact, people in the United States of America have a natural, constitutional, whatever you want to call it, right to things, commodities, goods and services. And this leaves Americans very vulnerable to scams from the government that all sound good on paper, but in reality are actually 100% scams. And if you were actually putting the money out of your own pocket directly, you would never invest in. And a lot of these scams happen to revolve around the homeless problem in the United States of America. Surely you have noticed the uptick in conversation related to the homeless. Maybe you've also noticed that we now change what we call the homeless. We now call them the unhoused, which is a very dubious and sneaky term that I want to delve into for a quick minute so you guys can understand why you should never use it. Homeless means something. It means somebody without a home, but it also means an individual without a home. Unhoused means somebody who is currently not being housed, meaning that there is somebody else who is responsible for the housing of that person, and the switch in term is meant to lend into the idea that housing is somehow no longer a good or service meant to be sought out in the market, but a human right, and somebody being unhoused is no longer a problem that that person needs to work out with their family or their community, but it's actually a problem of the other people of society that should be housing those people. And when you adopt their language, you start to adopt their premises in your mind, even before you can vocalize them. And this is one of the reasons why people are so supportive of quote-unquote affordable housing. Even though whenever government officials utter the phrase affordable housing and talk about the projects that they're going to invest in, you are being ripped off and scammed like you wouldn't believe. And we're going to talk about this, but first we got a sponsor, so we'll toss it over there and then we'll talk about this on the other side. Electric bills are up this summer. I know you're all aware of what's going on in the oil market, but that also affects every other aspect of the energy sector, and in a summer this hot, you definitely need a way to cool yourself while not breaking the bank. You don't need to be paying the double electricity bills that many people in many major cities are paying. So go over to easysummercool.com and get yourself one of these 4-in-1 mini air conditioners. I keep mine right by my bed at night and on my desk in order to supplement my cooling, and based on tips from you guys out there in the audience, I use it especially in those hot days that aren't so humid based on the way that it works. So again, go to easysummercool.com. You can get it for a 50% discount. That's easysummercool.com. I'm sure you guys are all aware of the homeless problem in the United States of America, and I'm sure you guys have heard about it in relation to the state of California. I'm sure you guys have heard about Skid Row, seen the images, seen other people cover the story, and I'm sure some of you have heard about California's plan to build affordable apartment units, and how this plan immediately has blown up into one of the biggest boondoggles in the state's history, because originally the proposal was going to spend about $250,000 per apartment unit for each homeless person to live in. However, already, even though it's not complete, the costs have ballooned to around $800,000 per person. And remember, these are people who are being rewarded for being addicted to drugs, living on the streets, camping on the streets, with premium apartments in neighborhoods that everyday people in California couldn't afford to live in. And they're costing nearly $1 million. And by the way, by the time these projects are actually done, we will hit more than $1 million per unit guaranteed, because that's how graft works. And by the way, Bill Maher, credit where credit is due, has been on this point in the state of California and how ridiculous it is for a long time, and I appreciate somebody who's on the left acknowledging the fact that these end up becoming giant giveaways to union contractors, well-connected corporations that end up leading to the taxpayers being ripped off and very little actual units being given to the homeless people. Not to mention the fact that these homeless people don't ever treat these units well, because their problems aren't the fact that they're unhoused. Their problems are underlying problems like mental illness and drug addiction, so no problem actually gets solved, but a bunch of connected construction companies not only get to overcharge for the building of these places, but they get to do perpetual maintenance of these places because they're always going to be in disrepair, because they're going to be destroyed repeatedly by the tenants that use them. Now look, homelessness exists across the country. Every state has a homeless population. However, California is specifically bad at incentivizing their homeless population to live on the streets. First and foremost, the weather is against them. It's beautiful in Southern California, so living on the streets is more comfortable comfortable there than in other states in the union. But the second thing is that they're in the Ninth Circuit's jurisdiction, and the Ninth Circuit has ruled that you have a natural constitutional right to camp in public, thus meaning these people can't be removed, and their property, their shopping carts, all the trash that they collect is actually protected property, as Joe Rogan outlined recently when he was talking about the absurdity of LA prosecutions.
That's protected property, like by law. You know that? Like if you were
so you're not supposed to do that.
But but like that's that person's property by law. If you were to
the homeless person's property is
Yes.
protected?
Yes, absolutely.
Huh.
If you were to go and try to move that or take that,
You get arrested.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Mm-hmm. But they wouldn't arrest you if you shot somebody. Maybe you should just go and shoot the homeless people.
I like your ideas.
Yeah. And if nobody claims it. I mean, nobody does anything about violent crime in L.A. anymore. It's a fucking joke.
Yes, in LA, like many other places in this country that are being taken over by left-wing politicians, left-wing district attorneys, the chances of you being prosecuted for violent crimes are exceptionally low. The chances of you being prosecuted for violent property crimes or looting or destroying property are exceptionally low. But if you touch a homeless person's property, you bet your bottom dollar they will be on you and prosecuting and fining you for that, because the homeless are granted special rights above the everyday citizens there. Now, while I could do entire videos on California and their issues with the homelessness, and I could talk about it for hours, days even, I'm not going to do that, because the problem with affordable housing projects is the fact that there's scams everywhere in the country 100% of the time. Anytime the government is spending money on housing like this, you best believe that you are going to be ripped off as a taxpayer. Now, we talked about how the price of apartment units in California, in those affordable units, have ballooned to about $800,000. But in reality, you don't have anything to compare that to, so maybe you think that's perfectly normal. Well, guess what? It isn't. Typically, to build apartment units in buildings like this, the costs range from $60,000 to $80,000. Obviously, California would be on the higher end of the spectrum in terms of private developments, maybe even hitting $100,000, but $800,000 is $700K minimum in overcharge. That's totally BS due to the fact that it's being built in conjunction with the California government. But they're not the only ones who do it like this. First of all, again, every time you have a state or city affordable housing project, you would be shocked to look at the graph that's going on in these projects. But of course, New York City is chief among them, and they just flaunt the fact that they're doing this. Take a look at this news segment that I saw on my local news in the state of New York. You will notice that Kathy Hochul, Eric Adams, and all the New York City politicians are there for the groundbreaking of this apartment building that is being built in the Bronx.
2, 1, right here.
It was all smiles as Governor Kathy Hochul, Mayor Eric Adams, and other local leaders broke ground on 326 affordable apartments. When completed in about 2 years, the $189 million development will include 200 homes with supportive services for homeless individuals.
Now, this news segment is essentially a campaign ad for Kathy Hochul, which is actually really obnoxious when you think about it, because the only reason she's here at this groundbreaking ceremony is for the campaign clout, is for the attention, is for, look, she's doing something, she's got a shovel in her hand. Aren't you proud of Kathy Hochul investing in the poor people and making sure we build apartments for the homeless? In fact, the only criticism that is put forward by the news agency throughout the course of this segment is a criticism of her not supporting something called good cause legislation, which would make it even more impossible to evict people in the city of New York and would cap all rent increases at 3% a year, thus crippling the rental market, thus disincentivizing more building, and it would essentially create the exact opposite effect as we've gone over a bunch of different times. But again, if you want to hear more about housing in that context, whatever, I have other videos on that. You can look into that. You can delve deep into it. You can check my maths, you could check the numbers, you could check the data, you can trust the science, or you could trust the facts. Sometimes those things are different, whatever, that's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is the numbers that were quoted in this very news segment.
Broke ground on 326 affordable apartments. When completed in about 2 years, the $189 million development...
So according to this news segment, this glowing campaign puff piece done by my local news right here in the city of New York, the total cost of this building would be $189 million. The total number of units that will be built in this apartment building will be 326. So if you remember what I said earlier on in this video about the average cost for building an apartment unit in one of these big buildings being around 60 to 80K, you might be a little bit off put by the number 189 million for 326 units. You might find that a little bit striking because what that actually works out to is about $580,000 per unit in this building. And remember, the bigger the building, once you get into the hundreds of units territory, the lower the cost per unit it should be. But the national average for whatever size building is about $60,000 to $80,000. Now, I'm sure it's buildings over a certain amount of units, obviously, but we're still paying for 300 something units that are meant to be for homeless people and poor people in the city of New York. $500,000 too much per unit. And this is in a glowing segment for Governor Hochul. Now, I know some of my detractors out there might be thinking, Sean, shut your face. It's New York City even, so obviously things are going to be more expensive, and the fact that it costs $80,000 on the private market doesn't mean that because it's New York, that it doesn't make sense that this would cost $500,000 more per unit. And I would say, I take your point. It is New York City, but it's not Manhattan. It's not Brooklyn. It's not even Queens. We're talking about the Bronx. Do you know what the average cost for a home is in the Bronx? Not an apartment unit, a home? Because I do. I looked it up. The asking price in the Bronx in this year, by the way, when housing prices are exploding, is about $400,000, meaning that they're spending more than the asking price for a home on each individual unit. They're spending $180,000 more. Let's just make that clear. What the actual sale price is in the Bronx, again, a crazy surge in housing across the country that is affecting prices nationwide, supply chain shortages and all of that. And you've heard a bunch of stories about how people are listing their houses and their asking price is one thing, but these cash buyers are coming in and they're bidding well over asking price. It's crazy what's going on in this country. Well, it's not happening in the Bronx. The average sale price in the Bronx is $325,000. Hey guys, editing Sean here. Just to clarify right quick, because I don't make it particularly clear what I'm talking about, what I'm referring to is the price of a townhome, which looks like this, or a condo, which is very comparable, if not better quality than your average apartment. And remember, these are the sale prices versus what the state is paying to build these places. To give you an idea, to give you a perspective, if the state of New York wanted to spend this money on housing, they could actually buy the exact same number of houses, that 326 number, for the current price, which is, by the way, the price after a crazy market shock that shot prices up, building supply shortage, all that crazy stuff that's impacting the market, and they could still throw in $200,000 renovating all these properties to make them super nice. And again, we're talking about homes. They could renovate all these homes, buy them at the average market price, renovate them for $200,000, and they'd still have $40,000 left per home after that. That's what they're spending on these apartment units. And by the way, just to make this 100% clear for those of you who might be confused, this is the starting price. This is the price that they're pledging to spend right now. This is going to cost significantly more than $189 million. That's just not the way the government works, that they come in right at budget or even under budget. So in a few years, this is slated to be done in 2 years. Friendly reminder that the Empire State Building was built in under 1 year. The cost will balloon to into the $200, maybe into the $300 million range when all these grubby construction firms and well-connected union workers leech all the money out of this, and we find out that the building is only 30% done. So it's going to take about 5 years. It's going to cost about 3 times as much. But if they just spent that money right now on buying houses, they could renovate the houses, make them luxury houses in the Bronx, and they'd still have $40,000 per house on them to do whatever they wanted with. This is the scam of affordable housing. When a private developer builds a housing project, they build it because they want to make money off the housing. When the government builds it, they do it in such a way that they overpay for labor because it's a jobs program. You can never have affordable housing when you have all these well-connected industries leeching all the money because it's actually a jobs program. So stop buying into it. Stop supporting it. Stop forking over your hard-earned taxpayer money for these projects because they never live up to expectations. They always come in over budget. And by the way, when you distort the market in this way, it actually makes housing more expensive overall, not less. Not to mention, when you pile all these people into this neighborhood, all these homeless people, without resolving their underlying problems, and put them in with a bunch of low-income people making 30% of the median income of the area, you're going to get an increase in crime that's going to further destabilize these neighborhoods. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. Well, actually, they're facts, and if you disagree with me, you're dead wrong. Let me know your thoughts, and if you disagree with me, your wrong opinion down in the comments below. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about the affordable housing scam. Till next time.